Hello friends, and welcome back to another virtual story time with Miss Liz. It is another hot day in Philadelphia, and it's supposed to be hot all week long. So I want to make sure that you are all checking in with each other and with yourselves. How are you feeling? Are you drinking enough water? Are you putting on sunscreen? Are you taking time to eat enough so that you don't get tired out in the heat if you're going outside? It's very important to be aware of these things and to check on your friends and neighbors, especially your elderly neighbors, to make sure that they are also okay and that they have everything that they need. So today, I am really excited to share with you a true story about something that happened in America not too long ago. It is the story of interracial marriage. The book for today is called The Case for Loving, The Fight for Interracial Marriage. And it was written by Selina Alko and illustrated by Qualls and Selina Alko. This is another book from Scholastic Publishers. And like I said, this is a true story. This really happened. Let's find out what's going to happen next. The Case for Loving, The Fight for Interracial Marriage by Selina Alko and illustrated by Qualls and Selina Alko. Here is a picture of a family. See here, we have 2 parents and we have 3 kids. And don't they look like they are having a lovely time together? Would you be surprised if I told you that at one time it was illegal for certain people to get married and have a family? Doesn't that seem crazy? Well, it really happened, and this is the story. First comes love, then comes marriage. Here is the Loving family. Yes, their last name really was Loving. And there were 3 kids. Donald and Peggy and Sydney had 2 parents who loved them and who loved each other. In fact, from almost the moment that Richard Loving met Mildred Jeter, they wanted to get married and have a family. But for them, it wasn't that simple. And here's why. Richard was white, a fair-skinned boy who got quickly sunburned in July. And Mildred was what they called colored in those days. Her skin was a creamy caramel. So Richard was white and Mildred was black. And that was a problem for some people. In 1958, they lived in the small town of Central Point, Virginia, where people of every shade, from the color of chamomile tea to summer midnight, made their homes. Richard Loving was a good, caring man. He didn't see differences. There was one person Richard loved more than the rest. Mildred Jeter was part African American, part Cherokee. But what most folks in Central Point noticed was how thin she was. And that's how she got her nickname, String Bean. And when Richard popped the question and asked String Bean if she would marry him, she jumped with joy. Look at that. He was saying, "Mildred, will you marry me?" And she said, "Yes, I will." And then the 2 were in love. They felt it should be their right to get married. Sadly, it was not. Not in Virginia or in 16 other states. In those places, marriage between people of different races was against the law. 100 years earlier, slavery divided America along color lines. Even after slavery ended, some white people weren't used to blacks being left alone, free to marry who they choose. If you married someone who had a skin color unlike your own, you could go to jail. Mildred and Richard wanted to get married, but they did not want to spend any time in prison. So if you look at this picture, you'll notice here is a family over here by this water fountain, and here's a family over here by this water fountain. What's the difference? Is that this family is standing by a water fountain labeled white. That was a water fountain that they said only white people could use. And the family over here, the black family, is by a water fountain that says colored. At the time, that's how they referred to people with darker skin, as colored. And they used to tell people that they had to use separate water fountains. It's not really that way anymore, but you can see that it's not too long ago that we were doing these things that we can look back on and say, oh, that was truly bad. So let's see what's going to happen for Richard and Mildred next. Although they couldn't have a marriage in Virginia, they could right next door in Washington, D.C. So they invited a few friends and family to witness their wedding across state lines. And at the ceremony, nobody objected when Richard said, "I do," and Mildred said, "I do." The Lovings were officially pronounced husband and wife. The blushing bride and her groom smiled all the way from D.C. back to their home in Virginia. They couldn't wait to start a family together. But then something terrible happened. Soon, in the middle of the night, they were awoken from their sleep. Knock, knock, knock. It was the police. An officer shouted at Richard, "What are you doing with that woman?" Richard proudly pointed to their marriage certificate, which was hanging on the wall. "That's no good here," the policeman boomed. Remember, in Virginia, it was still illegal for whites and blacks to get married, and now Richard and Mildred were in trouble. And just like that, Mildred and Richard were taken away and locked up in jail. They were charged with unlawful cohabitation, which means living together against the law. The Lovings didn't think there was anything unlawful about their love at all. If anything, they thought the way that they were treated should have been unlawful. It was just awful. Think about that. Two people, two adults who loved each other and had gotten married were put in jail for living together. That is how bad the laws were. After a few nights behind bars, Richard and Mildred were told they had to leave Virginia if they wanted to live together as Mr. and Mrs. Loving. They gave them a choice. They said, you can either stay here and live apart, or you can leave. So what did they choose? With heavy hearts, the pair hugged their families, they packed their bags, and they left home. They were leaving Virginia. They decided they wanted to stay together, but they couldn't stay together in Virginia. So they tried to make a life for themselves in Washington, D.C. Richard found a job laying bricks, and String Bean gave birth to 3 babies, 3 different shades of milk chocolate brown, Donald and Peggy and Sydney. But the city didn't suit the Lovings. They didn't like D.C. There were too many cars. There was too much concrete. They missed Central Point with its rolling hills and open spaces. They missed their friends and their families. They missed their home. The home that told them they were not free to live together and love each other. What were they going to do? They wanted to return to Virginia for good, so they hired lawyers to help fight for what was right. By now, it was 1966, and the times they were a-changin'. Brand new ideas like equal rights for people of all colors were replacing the old, fearful ways of thinking. Maybe the Lovings have a chance after all to change history. The lawyers worked around the clock to make the case for interracial marriage as strong as possible. It was time to take the Loving case all the way up to the most powerful court in the land, the Supreme Court. On June 12th, 1967, when the case of Loving versus Virginia began, Richard and Mildred stayed at home with Donald and Peggy and Sidney. They were all nervous and afraid that they would not win. The state argued that in order to preserve the purity of the white race, blacks and whites must remain separate. Ugh, I don't like that idea. Then it was the Lovings lawyers' turn to present their case. They said it was unconstitutional to make marriage a crime because of race. And they read a message from Richard himself. He wrote, "Tell the court I love my wife, and it is just unfair that I can't live with her in Virginia." It didn't take long for a decision to be made. It was unanimous. The court ruled in favor of the Lovings. Interracial couples could now legally marry in Virginia. Richard and Mildred hugged. They won their right to love, and they were free at last. Look at them. They're so happy. They worked so hard for so long to make sure that they could have the life that they wanted for them and for their family. So, over 9 years after their arrest, the Lovings packed their bags one final time. Richard planned to build a big, roomy brick house in Central Point, and Stringbean was ready to start their life over. The Loving family returned to Virginia to live happily and legally ever after. And here at the end, you can see a real picture of the Loving family and a real picture of the authors and the illustrators who wrote this book. And if you are able to get yourself a copy of this book from the library or somewhere else, you can read even more information about what this book explained. For now, that is the end. I hope you all enjoyed this story, and I hope you learned something about the Lovings and the case and the fight for interracial marriage. These are some things that we have been able to overcome in the recent past, but we are not done yet. Remember that it is the job of me and you and everybody to be fighting for what is right, even when it's hard. So, thank you all for reading with me. I will see you tomorrow as I read from the library some more great books. Thanks for watching.